Like, huh?
Yeah.
Oh. All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my co-host,
Simone Sheree.
and correspondent,
Kyle Andrew.
All right, so it is another Friday, and were we here last Friday?
No, it was Black
How about
Friday.
I feel like I missed it. You would remember that.
Absolutely.
I feel like I missed something, and so we're here, and God knows there's a lot of stuff going on. So our guest today, Flynn Broady, will be with us shortly. But we'll go ahead and get started. So there's a lot going on that we could talk about until he gets here. So Simone, what's on the rundown?
So we're going to talk about what's going on with the 2020 elections because those were over a month ago now.
Literally, I'm like, so why are you saying like it's fresh? It's not fresh.
But there's always fresh news because we've got a record, I think, of 27 different active either suits or challenges. So we're gonna just give a highlight. We don't have time to do all of that today. And we have a lot of criminal justice we're going to talk about once our guest is here. But in Georgia, there was a particularly interesting development yesterday. So we'll talk about what happened in Georgia with regard to the recounts. We'll talk about the coronavirus relief bill if we have a couple more minutes there. A little bit of vaccine news too, and then some entertainment news that I think you guys have found that I think will be very interesting because it's showing how everything is going to change in the future a little bit. So for the recount news, Rudy Giuliani, Mayor, I hope people know who Rudy Giuliani is. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because his name was mispronounced yesterday, which I...
By who?
By individuals who are not sure who he is, who are in our state legislature.
What?
Yes. His, which
He's always
just
all
goes to
over
show.
stuff. Like how? Oh, that's maybe what they were talking about on The View. I was like, what are they talking about? Like,
I think it just goes to show that Georgia is, I mean, every state is its own country, and our officials have their own, priorities and their own things to worry about. But at any rate, he testified yesterday before the Georgia Senate. So our state legislature met pretty much all day. There's two different committees. One's the Government Oversight Committee, one's the Judiciary Committee, but the whole topic was the elections and Georgia's new voting machines, allegations of fraud. A couple of individual parties also came and presented evidence before the committees of fraud and videos, tapes that they've seen. And a lot of the allegations that we've been hearing about in terms of what happened in Georgia, really what happened all over the country, but in particular in Fulton County, there were allegations that ballots were being taken from underneath the table, big boxes of ballots and big truckloads of ballots that were all marked Biden, and that people were being moved out of the rooms. Especially Republican officials have said this, that they were kicked out of the rooms while Democrats were allowed to stay and observe. So there's a lot around the elections process that a lot of people are very upset about, a lot of very frustrated about. President Trump has been very adamant that there has been widespread fraud, and in particular in Georgia, Rudy Giuliani came in and spoke and mentioned a couple of these things in a hearing that ultimately lasted all day long. So
let's not forget about the press conference that the person in charge of the election did. I was like, wow, where he was saying he was very bludgeon about stop making these comments. People are threatening our lives, all that stuff. He actually did a press conference in Georgia, and I was like, wow, that's.
Yeah, and there have been increasingly officials on top of officials who have been saying, Republican officials that is, who have kind of said that we need to cease conversations about voter fraud and claims like that because there have been a lot of threats on our Secretary of State. Brad Raffensperger, his wife, has been threatened, and some of the poll workers have been threatened and received death threats and all of that stuff. So there have been a lot of Republican officials who've come out, including former Governor Nathan Deal and Saxby Chambliss, all these other folks who have said that, we need to be very careful here about, what we're trying to see happen and the fact that this could get violent and people could act on their threats. If we continue to call this some sort of a theft, which is the narrative that's going on in these circles. But anyway, Giuliani had a whole team of experts who testified about the vulnerabilities of our voting systems. Remember, Georgia has new voting systems. These were the $100 million machines that were controversial at the time. Like after the 2018 elections, this is when, those conversations were happening. And this is the first election cycle that we're using these machines. And a lot of Democrats did not want to use these machines. That a lot of people had lots of different reasons for not wanting the machines, but we got them. We're rolling them out. Essentially, Giuliani said, that as a state, we have to be the final arbitrators about whether or not the process is fair, and it's our responsibility if we've got a false, fraudulent count, and we're submitting that count to the United States government. And he said that our count is false. All of the committees, all of the county elections boards in Georgia have certified that there was no fraud in their elections, that they were fair elections. Some of them are still in the middle of recounts right now. All of those recounts have been negligible if they've changed at all in terms of like the numbers. And right now Biden still stands to be the person who won, but which
is funny considering after the whole the Russians invaded the election in 2016, that they made sure that it was airtight. And now it's funny that everybody's going, well, this, it's just not fair. And everybody's going, no. We made sure that we did not have a debacle like we did in 2016. So we made sure, because you guys made us make sure that everything was airtight. So now you're saying that all the fail safes and all the precautions we took, now all of a sudden none of them work because it's not in your favor. This is it's the most ludicrous thing I've seen in a long time.
Georgia has recounted at this point at like twice, maybe 3 times.
We may have to. Yeah, we may have to. So,
wait, they're doing it again?
Well, every county has had to, and so my understanding is that the second recount is not done. It's not done.
I thought they certified it already. It's not done?
No, I think there's still 2 counties who have to. I'll check the status of that really quickly, but I think there's still 2 counties who are not done officially.
And they're already advocating for a third recount?
His attorneys are, and I don't know what the alternative is, because a redo is something very different. I don't know how you could possibly throw out these election results altogether. I think what these challenges would ultimately require Georgia to do is to change their process. So this particular attack that Giuliani's team was talking about was to do with the machines themselves, which if there's something wrong with the machines, it would not fall back then on the hands of the state of Georgia to be found criminally liable or liable civilly. The Dominion company would be sued, I'm sure, if not more. But that's the only thing that could possibly come of this, is if there's something wrong with the machines, if they're vulnerable to, whatever, that's really all that could come out of this. But there's over 12,000 votes between President Trump and Biden.
That's what I'm about to say. We're not talking about 200 votes.
Right.
We're talking about a significant number of votes.
And even Giuliani's team said that there was no specific county that, was corrupt. It was just they were arguing the entire machines all across the county, that these machines were vulnerable and that the whole process was just a bad process. That's what they were arguing. So to that effect, and this is what is so funny to me, is because President Trump, 24,000 less Republicans voted in November that voted in the primaries. So there were 24,000 Republicans in Georgia less. These were Republicans who voted by mail. And they didn't vote in November. Between May primaries, June primaries, and November, all the narrative from the Republicans and from President Trump was, do not vote by mail. And the mail is corrupt, and the system can't be trusted, and it's a bad idea, and vote in person, and COVID be damned, vote in person. And that's 24,000 Republicans who presumably would have voted in the general election who didn't vote.
So he was a cause to his own demise.
That's exact. So if there's any problem here, do you think about the fact that it's not just before the whole pandemic, the people who voted by mail were mostly older people. It was not like a Democratic thing or minority thing. Older people voted by mail because it made more sense for them. And a lot of older voters are Republican voters, or at least the other is true. A lot of Republican voters are older. The average age is older. So you told your own base not to vote by mail, and that's how they vote. So they did not vote. And that's 24,000. That would have made the difference.
Well, now the lazy ones vote by mail.
That is not
because
lazy.
The lazy ones vote by mail. Yes, Kyle, I'm talking about you, and I'm looking at you just to make sure that you know the lazy ones voted by mail. I personally slapped on my mask and was like, if I can go to the grocery store with the mask on, I can go to the polls and vote. And honestly, that was my first time voting in DCAB. It took all of 2 minutes. I was very impressed. Actually, I was more impressed with the poll workers sitting around chipping their nails and stuff because it was just that empty. But
I did take my girlfriend in Kennesaw the morning of the election to go vote, and it took her about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was.
But
there's nothing wrong with voting by mail.
My Senate runoff is going to be my mail as well.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh,
and that's what the drop boxes are for. It's not lazy.
Which
is it fun? Are you tracking it? Are you taking advantage of it?
Yeah, it's on the way.
You can track
They email me. They tell
me. This is not a UPS package. What are you talking? What is happening right now?
I think it's incredibly convenient.
I think y'all are ridiculous, and it's fine because y'all are ridiculous about this. Y'all are ridiculous about this whole Christmas spirit crap that y'all are on. But I digress. Yes, everybody, I'm being tortured in the studio with these two because Simone has decked her house out and everything that's not
Mr. Grinch.
That's unnailable.
You are.
I am not a Grinch. For heaven's sakes, I'm doing a Christmas special. Like, what else do y'all want from me? Yes, people, I'm doing a Christmas special.
You should be in the most jolly mood.
What?
You should be in the most jolly mood.
I'll be in a jolly mood after this over with. Production is not my friend. So yes, everybody, I'm doing a Christmas special. The Leadership Blend is doing a Christmas special, and it's gonna be one of those old school cheesy specials with cheesy skits and great singing. And yeah, I'm gonna make the whole Leadership Blend family be in it. TV team, podcast team. As you can see, these two airheads are excited about it. But hey, that's what you want, is the Christmas spirit. I was going somewhere with this, but I forgot. So just carry on.
I thought you were just talking about your special.
Well, yeah, but there was somewhere else I meant to go with this, and I can't remember.
You picking at me because of the absentee ballot.
I'm gonna do that the whole show. That's fine. I'm gonna do the whole show. carry on. I can't remember what it was. It was something about absentee ballots, and I can't remember.
Well, I'm sure people are still getting their text messages because it's not over, and we do have the Senate runoff that's coming up in
I remember what it was.
Yeah.
So it's funny that now Republicans are saying because they feel like the election is so rigged, they're not voting in the Senate race that's really prominent here. That would make the difference. So now they're saying, well, if it's so corrupt, I'm just not going to vote in the Senate race. Great, don't vote. So then we can win and we can take the Senate. So please,
but
do us a favor.
What I've been hearing folks say, especially from Kelly Loeffler's camp, who's one of the Senate candidates, or she's the incumbent actually, is that vote by mail for the January runoff because the voting machines are insecure. That's what's currently going on in terms of allegations. But it's like, that would have been a great message for your base back in the general election. It truly would have made the difference. Like, now telling people to vote by mail, vote by mail, vote by mail. Well, I thought mail. So it's like, this is the problem with poking holes in pieces of democracy and making people question it, because they listened. Like, their base listened. They listened to what they were told about not voting by mail, and this is what happened. And so now pivoting that message back, I think is just ridiculous. It didn't have to go down this way, basically.
Well, the good news is, in the time that we were out, Emily from the GSA? Is it GSA? GSU? The one that can provide the power to give Biden the access to go ahead and get access to everything he needs. I can't remember her name. It's Emily, and she's from, I think, the GSU or GSA 1-2. My bad, I should know better. In any event, she signed it. And the fact that she signed it, I authorized Biden to get all the resources that he needed, because I think before we went out, we were still hanging on that. He couldn't get what he needed because she hadn't signed off yet. And in our time that we were out, she did sign off on it, so Biden officially has access to the monies that he needs to hire staff and all that good stuff, which is why you're seeing so much stuff happen in the everything moving forward. So you see his cabinet being announced, all these appointings,
meeting with
and all that
medical
good stuff
advisors
happen.
and stuff like
so
that.
So yeah, that's one of the good things that we have going
for the General Services Administration. So I think this is all just kind of a really good lesson. I'm really, again, curious to see what happens with that turnout. We've had a lot of situations where we talked about this a little bit before, when the opposing party wins the executive branch, it is usually very hard to get turnout for runoffs. Turnout is hard, period. I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't care if it's a very highly contested race or if you're an incumbent candidate. It can be really difficult to get people out again. Those are the faithful few. Those are the folks who turn out for the primaries, which is not always a huge crowd.
The fear that I had, I'm starting to see. I'm not really worried about Warnock. I'm not worried about him because he's a preacher of one of the most prominent black churches in the city. So he has a congregation he's speaking to every Sunday. And, you know, with African-American folks, church is very important to us. I'm not really worried about him maintaining his momentum. Ossoff is the one that concerns me, because if Ossoff does not motivate you guys until we get to that election, he's going to be in trouble. And I have not seen as much momentum from him as I saw going into the general election. So I am concerned about that Ossoff thing. And you know my opinion. I feel like he's a little fetus. He's running against a grown man, and I'm a little worried about it. I'm not worried about Warnock and Kelly, but I am worried about Ossoff, because he got to ride that wave until we get into January, and I'm worried about that wave. It doesn't look as strong as it did going to general elections. So I'm a little worried about that.
Okay. I think we can cover our Senate a little bit more. These are really, really highly contested races. This is a big race for the nation, especially because this is the first time Georgia's been this important for a U.S. Senate race. So I know these text messages are annoying.
If I get one more.
I don't get any.
Get your absentee.
What do you mean you don't get any?
I don't get any.
Anyway.
How's that possible?
I've never done jury duty. I don't know.
See, you just put in the atmosphere. You end up doing jury duty first thing out the gate next year, because that's what I said. I was like, I've never done jury. And bam, in the mail. It was like, okay, we expect to see you. It was the worst time.
Do your duty, people. That's the message. That's the message here. I think we cannot go any further without talking about our guest that we're so excited to have here today. I wanted to go over your bio just a little bit, sir, and we have for the rest of the show to talk a lot about what you're going to be doing, to talk about criminal justice moreover, to talk about the judiciary and explain to people from the bottom to the top exactly why your office is so important. But we have Flynn Broady Jr. here.
All right, hold on before he says anything. This is an important moment. So for those that do not know, in 2018, that was your first. 2018 was Simone's very first show with the Leadership Blend, and this was the guest. So out the gate, she had to do this out the gate. So this show is very significant to me, and it should be to her, because this is when she officially started on the show. So everybody, welcome back. Show our friend, Mr. Flynn Broady Jr. How's it going, sir?
It's going great. It's great to be back here in this time as a candidate that won his race.
Exactly.
Look,
awesome.
Simone texted me that day and was like, so you know he won. I was like,
wait,
what?
Yeah.
What? I was like, oh, who are we talking about? She was like, Flynn, what? I didn't know he was back and doing.
I did because you were at the time Assistant Solicitor General, I think, for Cobb County, and we talked to you about everything, and you were awesome.
Right.
And we got to talk to you a little bit about what that means and what that role is. We talked about your career as a veteran. Can you give everybody a little bit more of your background if they don't know, if they're not close to Cobb County and they don't understand what your history is?
Well, I'll start off by saying my entire adult life I've served our country and also our community. Did 26 years in the military, retired in 2008. While I was in the military, I had a chance to go to law school at Seton Hall University School of Law. Graduated there, came to Cobb County, started practicing as an Assistant Solicitor General. I've been there since 2008, decided that Cobb County needed a change. And I thought I could make that change happen by running for the district attorney. And I was blessed enough to be able to win the race. And it was actually a historical race because it was probably the first time that Cobb County had two African Americans running for district attorney, and I will be the first African American elected district attorney in Cobb County.
It's a big deal.
It's
a big deal. Actually, a lot of things, a wave kind of happened in Cobb. It's like I looked at a post, I was like, wow, they're all like black.
Yeah.
And let's be very clear,
Yeah.
Cobb County, if you ask black folks in other counties, they're just like, I don't go to Cobb County. That's just not for black folks. I lived in Cobb County for 10 years. I loved it. I'm actually mad I moved.
Yeah.
But I love Cobb County. But yeah, there was like a African-American wave that came through Cobb County. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. And if people don't know the background in general, for this election, even though the blue wave that everybody's been talking about nationally, people have been talking about, there's been a lot of skepticism about whether or not there was ever a blue wave. But there was definitely like a major justice referendum in the state of Georgia, not just in Cobb County, with regard to sheriff offices and down to court clerks, superior court clerks. I mean, a lot of incumbent Republicans lost their seats, and especially in big counties, and Cobb's a huge county. But Gwinnett County as well. The Brunswick Judicial Circuit, which is the circuit that was originally attached to the Ahmaud Arbery case, also which moved to Cobb, also very important for Cobb. But a lot of these offices, the first black sheriff ever, I think, was also elected in some of three of these counties. So it was a huge thing. And then the qualified immunity waiver that Rep. Estration, I think he was the initial champion for, but ended up on the ballot, and that also passed. So a lot of the national headlines did, I think, translate down to Georgia, even though they didn't necessarily change the state legislature at all. So,
which I think that's what excited me, was the fact that we've been harping on, you guys got to vote in the local elections. These are the people that directly affect you every day.
Mm-hmm.
The general election, that's great. But these people that you're not paying attention to on the ballot, that you're just kind of swishing through, these are the people that directly affect your life on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how it resonated, but it resonated.
Amen.
And I was just elated to see, of course, our guy out here winning, but just elated to see that was a wave that came through, and it was just amazing.
Yeah. Cobb County, right now we're going to have 5 commissioners, and all female. 3 African Americans for the first time on the board. The chairman is now going to be Lisa Cupid, who used to represent District 4. She's going to be the chair. We've got an African American sheriff, an African American court clerk, and of course an African American district attorney. And like you said, Ricardo, the local elections are so important to our everyday life that people need to understand when you vote, you have to vote up and down the ballot.
Absolutely.
And it's important who you vote for. And Georgia has had a wave of regressive prosecutors throughout in Brunswick, in Athens, here, Gwinnett, a wave of progressive prosecutors who are looking more for criminal justice reform than we have ever had in the past, and I think that is critical for us.
So we wanted to do a little bit of educational stuff, especially in the beginning, because turnout was record this year, which is great, which means people are probably getting more and more educated, but I always think it's helpful to start from the bottom with what a district attorney does, what your team looks like, what your mission is. Maybe you could start there, but then also like day to day, like on a day-to-day basis, what that looks like.
You have to understand the district attorney is the most powerful law enforcement person in your community. That is the person who actually says what charges you're going to have to face, whether you're going to jail, for how long you're going to jail. Everything that happens in the criminal justice system revolves around your district attorney. When you get arrested by the police, that's step 1. The police may charge you with 1 charge, but the district attorney can take a look at that 1 charge, and it can become 10 charges. It can become something less than that 1. And then the district attorney is the one who goes forward on those charges, whether to send you to jail, whether you go into trial, what kind of plea deal you're going to get, what your probation is going to look like, what your parole is going to look like. The district attorney controls all of that. He makes all the decisions as far as charging of what charges you face each and every day on the criminal justice system. Where the district attorney works best is when we look at our community in Cobb County, one of the things that we look at is how many simple possession charges we have when it comes to drugs. Those charges, the district attorney can make the decision to say, okay, we're not going to prosecute those charges, or we're going to send everybody to diversion, or we're going to send everybody to some accountability court, something other than giving that person a criminal record. And whether people know it or not, that is so critical, especially if you're going to go to college. You can't get federal aid if you've got a criminal.
Right. So to elaborate there, when we're talking about simple possession, what's some of the most common? Because that's very, very common.
Simple
so what are we
possession could be marijuana, could be cocaine, heroin, meth. Those are the most common ones. And most police officers, you know, when you get stopped, if they smell it, they can search for it. They find it, you're going to jail. And then now it's up to the district attorney to say what happens after that. What you'll see now with all of these progressive prosecutors, you're going to see a lot of us say, okay, for those simple possession charges, we're going to ask you to do a few things. Maybe take an alcohol and drug evaluation. If it requires treatment, do the treatment. Once you complete that, then we may say the charge is going to be dismissed. So that way it stays off your record. Then it's up to you to make sure you stay clean. The other thing that is as a progressive prosecutor does is make sure that, you know, nonviolent charges, they're not that critical. You know, no, we don't want you going out doing nonviolent crimes, but those are not the people that we want to put in jail and throw under the jail. Those are the people we want to treat, get them back into community, restore them to the community so that way they can be productive and not have to result to a life of crime. That's why it's so critical that you have a good district attorney, and those things are very vital.
Sure.
That's perfect.
I think some of the cases that came up this year had a lot to do with what happened here, and we did briefly talk about Ahmaud Arbery. Obviously, the George Floyd murder that we all witnessed that went viral around the world was also very influential as well, and has spearheaded a lot of legislation. But the case that was pertinent to Georgia and why Georgia made those headlines around the Ahmaud Arbery case wasn't necessarily because it wasn't about law enforcement. This was kind of a question of individuals, and there was a very old statute predating modern history that was not only common in Georgia, but those sort of stand your ground, the sort of castle doctrine laws about how citizens participate in the process. I think that issue came up with the video, you know, talking about individuals who see something that they find suspicious that they pursue. And there's a couple of cases that are come around those themes in the state of Georgia. So can you talk a little bit about your, just outside of the case just in general, but your awareness and when you came to hear about that case, and then how this came to land in the Cobb County Circuit as well, because this was something Ricardo didn't know.
It was in Brunswick. How did it cycle its way over to Cobb County? Because I heard it, but when I went to do the research, I was like, well, is he acquiring that or is he not acquiring that? And then we got here today, he was like, he is acquiring. I'm like, how did that cycle from Brunswick to Cobb County? Like,
well, it starts with the fact when it first happened, the district attorney in Brunswick was notified of what happened. And because of some relationship that she had with one of her former investigators, she decided that this was a good citizen arrest, self-defense, no charges were going to be filed. Until the video showed up, maybe 4 or 5 months later, that's when everybody realized, hey, this was not self-defense. This man was tracked down, trapped, and forced to defend himself against two basically vigilantes. She decided, I can't handle the case because I have a relationship with him. So she moved it to another district attorney. And you're not even supposed to do it that way. You're supposed to say, hey, Attorney General Carr, this is what's happening in our case. I have to recuse myself, so please assign it to someone else. Well, the second prosecutor that took over the case said, well, I can't do it because I have a relationship with someone who works in your office. So now we have to have a third prosecutor assigned, and that's when they went to Attorney General Carr, and this is after the investigation was taking place by the GBI and Vic Reynolds, and Carr decided to give the case to Joyette Holmes in Cobb County. And I'll speculate 2 different reasons. I don't know if any of these are true, but she had just been appointed by the Governor Kemp, knowing she was going to have to run an election. What better way to get her name out there give her a high-profile case, and that's basically what they did. Because she lost her election, I will assume her role, and I will take over the case. We're still going to keep the same prosecutors that are currently on the case, Mr. Evans, Mr. Norman. We're going to keep them on the case, so there's some continuity there. They've been handling all the motions, and they're going to go forward with the case. Hopefully, sometime in January, we'll get it started.
So I think just because this is a topic has been fascinating to me for a really long time, and there's so many little videos that come out all the time, and there's these memes where this unidentified woman named Karen exists, in which anybody who is very adamant or concerned about something going on that doesn't appear to have anything to do with them, but is ready to take action on it, has become this person.
She has a persona. It's a persona.
A persona, yes. But so there's also another case. Actually, this is in Clayton County, in which something similar sort of happened. There was a young woman who said that she witnessed a hit and run and then chased down that driver and ultimately shot him when he would not leave his vehicle. Again, a situation didn't appear to have anything to do with her, but that she really felt she needed to act on. Can you kind of talk a little bit about public safety moreover, and what you think the individual's responsibility is in public safety? When I say individual, I mean our neighbors, bystanders. Obviously, witnesses are very important to law enforcement or to public safety. I mean, when my wife was in a car accident, we were very happy she had a witness, somebody who saw what happened. But when does that become unsafe, in your opinion?
Well, to me, the citizen arrest statute really needs to go away.
Yeah,
we have 911 for a reason, and that's for you to call and report what you've seen, and then let the people who are taught and trained to do this do it. Because in her case, she runs after this car, ends up shooting him. What if he had a gun?
Right.
What if he pulls his gun because he sees her gun? Now we want to charge him with murder. No, he didn't murder her. He was self-defending himself. Mm-hmm. And that's what people have to understand. You cannot go after criminals on your own volition because you don't know what's happening. And with the Almeida Opry case, that was one of the things that they were trying to use as a defense, they saw him commit a crime. Well, he didn't commit a crime. He went in a house, a vacant house that was being rebuilt. I don't know who doesn't do that because I do it all the time. When he ran out the house, they didn't see him with anything, so they had no cause to arrest him. And that's what led to what happened to them. And we have to understand that, our safety is paramount. But there are people who are trained to do this, and that's who we should let do it. Don't put yourself in a position where you could be killed or you could be hurt or some way, and then it ultimately ends up going like the young lady, where now she's charged with murder because she did something outside the scope of what she was supposed to do.
Right.
Well, I think that's the scary part. When I saw the video of Ahmaud, it was scary to me because it looked like the beginning of A Time to Kill. Like it literally reminded me of videos we've seen from the past with people doing that kind of stuff. So this notion of vigilante justice it's not kosher. It's not a culture thing that I want to encourage or to be encouraged because it's not safe.
How do we? This is a higher level question. I really want to know how you think the public can be served in terms of feeling that their courts are fair. Like that, there's sort of this justice is such a high ideal that I really find, especially in a very partisan world, it is hard to be in a situation where even a handful of people will all agree that justice was served in a case. It's a very hard thing to capture for some people. And there are always victims of crimes, and a lot of people who feel that that the scales are balanced and tipped in the direction that's opposing to them. So how do you think the public can regain trust in the court system and trust in public safety? What do you think that would look like in an ideal situation?
For a prosecutor, you have a twofold duty. Not only must you protect the victims, but you have to protect the offenders. And most prosecutors forget that. And the first way you protect offenders is making sure that through every process of the criminal justice system, they have legal representation. When you try to come into the court without legal representation and face a prosecutor, you are so far under the table, it's not even funny.
That's true.
And that's why you have to have legal representation. We have to do a better job of defending our circuit defender and our public defender offices. We have to make sure that from arrest to bond, there's a lawyer there who can negotiate the bonds. And I've committed in my circuit now to say that if it's a nonviolent offense, we're going to let you go and let you have a court date. Now, if you don't show up for the court date, I have no choice but to give you a bench warrant. But if it's a nonviolent offense, we're going to let you go. If you are a threat to somebody in the community, that's going to be a different story, and people need to understand that because our ultimate goal is to protect people. But okay, we're going to make sure you have representation at the bond hearing. When you come to your arraignment hearing or probable cause hearing, you're going to have representation to make sure you have somebody that's on your side fighting for you. And as a prosecutor, you want to make sure that the defense attorney is actually advocating for his client. You don't want the defense attorney who's just going to say, "Oh, take the plea, do this, because that's how we end up putting people in jail that don't belong in jail. And I would much rather us let 30,000 criminals go loose than for us to put one man in jail that doesn't belong in jail.
Well, how can a prosecutor do all of that though? Like, how can that feels like such a bigger responsibility? Like, it feels like it's something that the state should care about, or that the federal government should care about, that they should fund public defenders' offices, and they should make sure that there aren't, 1 to 99 caseloads and all of those things. Like, it feels like a really, really big scope.
No, as a prosecutor, you have the ability to lobby with our legislatures and let them know, hey, in order for us to have the best criminal justice system possible, this is what we need on both sides of the table. And it's critical for people who want a sense of fairness and justice to understand that's what we're doing. Because if we're not doing that, you're not getting justice and fairness. I was sitting down with someone yesterday, and he really got railroaded. I'm not going to mention any names, but the person who was his defense attorney was becoming the new DA. And he had like 3 months before he became the new DA. So he was trying to close out his cases before he became DA. And what happened is he had his guy take a plea, even though he felt the guy was innocent. He professes to be innocent. And based on what he's told me and the reports that I've seen, it looks like he was innocent. In order to close out this plea, he made him take a plea for something, no jail time, probation. So it seems on the outside a good thing. But he's on probation for 10 years. And so if he makes one mistake, he can go to jail for the balance of that probation. And that's wrong. And as a prosecutor, your focus should be on restoring people back to the community. You don't want a sentence that's going to punish somebody so bad that when they come back to the community, they don't have no home, they can't get a job. And then what happens is we as a society end up having to take care of them, or they start reverting back to crime. And so that's the focus you have to have as a district attorney, as a prosecutor, and be willing to talk to your legislatures and say, hey, this is what I need here in my circuit, so that way we can make sure justice is fair. Because anytime you look at a community, and I don't care who you are, if you're a big business, when you start to look where you want to move your business, you're going to say, okay, is it safe?
Right.
And so we have to develop better strategies to make sure our communities are safe, because what we've been doing in the past has not been working.
And Georgia has notoriously long probation sentences. We've talked about this before.
in grave detail.
Yeah.
And all that in grave detail. Which I'm not even going to lie.
More detail than you had patience for.
Because you feel very strongly about it. I did not
That's
realize
what I do.
how much of a diabolical scheme it really is, from the restitution to the time you have to. I didn't realize until we talked about it that when you get a speeding ticket and you go on parole, that's technically parole when you're paying money. I was like, wait, so I've been on parole before? Because I took the thing.
There's a lot to it. Is it the question of whether or not you want to be confined or you don't?
Right.
And so, I mean, now there are some people who, for lots of different reasons, are familiar enough with the justice system, and I talk to them all the time, that will say, well, put me behind bars. I'll take 3 months. I don't want to be on probation for 5 years. They'll say, give me 3 months behind bars, which is a big thing. And the idea that you'd rather be without your liberty than... And
honestly, if it's a money issue, the only thing you have to do is pay a fine. We shouldn't put you on probation. And I'm a firm believer, as a prosecutor in the Assistant Solicitor General's office, I would never put somebody on probation just because they had to pay a fine. I would give them the time to get the money together so that way we can take care of it. Because even on probation, now your fine goes from $300 to an extra $39 and $40 a month.
I think it ended up being like 3 or 4 months. And I was like, and they don't call it probation. So you're just like, oh, well, there's like, well, yeah, you can break it up and you can just pay it. And I'm like, wait, this is actually probation? Like, you added taxes and all kind of stuff to this. So
it's just funny.
It's almost like check cashing. Like when you go to do the check cashing place and you get a $500 loan, you pay $1,000 back because they've added money to it. It's almost that same mindset. I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize that.
It's funny because I can imagine you walking to an office to make your payment and looking around and thinking, am I in the right place?
The first 2 times, and I was in, I think, Sandy Springs. So it was like, I'm going there, I'm like, wait, what? Why are you here? It's like, well, I'm on probation. Wait, is this a probation office? Why?
Like, I must be in the wrong place.
Because they didn't tell you where it is. It's like they give you the address. So I'm driving there. I'm like, wait, are you guys criminals? Like, did you really? Why am I here?
Apparently, you're a criminal as well.
Clearly, I discovered that like three weeks in. I was like, oh my God.
This was after one ticket?
Yeah.
This happens to everybody?
No, it doesn't happen. If you can't pay the full amount of the ticket, there are some jurisdictions that will put you on a payment plan.
Okay.
That's what they call it, but it's actually probation.
Misdemeanor probation. Yeah.
Which you don't know because they give you. It's like, well, yeah, you could do the payment plan and you just go pay it here, and you pull up and you're just like. And it's like this funny looking building. I don't even think it had parole office on it. So you walk and you're just like, well, I'm here to pay, such ticket. And you see a line of people. And you're like, wait, and they're talking. So you're just like, wait, you shot somebody or what? And then it's like, oh my God, this is the probation office.
Hold on.
And they talk to you like that. So it's like, well, yeah, your next
Wow.
payment is due on.
But
It was traumatic once I discovered
I really
what it
hope
was.
nobody's discussing their crimes with you. But
look.
here's what I will say though, and this is a serious question. A lot of times, especially because we mentioned probation, I hear from people that there are only so many options. And I've heard this from a lot of judges time and time again. It's that like, okay, maybe someone does need treatment, but I'm in this jurisdiction. There's like one treatment program. There's a 3-month waiting list for that. Or, the treatment that you need, you can't take advantage of their 3-week 12-step program. So it's like, I want to know about that situation. Are we so underfunded in our options for people that we put people in jail literally because we don't want to spend money anywhere else? Because in the past year, and this is just context for people, every single department under the Georgia state budget was cut for the most part. The big glaring exceptions to that did include, I think, the GBI in particular. So their budget was not cut significantly, which is a bigger part of our governor's administration agenda. But like the services, health and human services departments, those were cut pretty drastically. The defender's budget, public defender's offices were cut pretty drastically. Re-entry services were cut. So are we just so unwilling to spend? Is that the problem? We're unwilling to spend the money, and that is why there is no other option but to put people in jail?
Let me add to that question. So, and also with all that stuff being said, what does rehabilitation look like for somebody that gets out of prison? Like,
Sure.
what safeguards, what safe ways do we have to rehabilitate them to make them a productive citizen once they leave our prison system?
Well, a lot of what you guys are talking about is our focus is not on prevention, but on cure.
Right.
And one of the things that we need to make sure we do is we access all the resources we have in our community. Me running for DA has opened my eyes up to so many more resources that I never knew that we had available in our community. And as a prosecutor, you have to know those resources so those people who cannot pay for a regular evaluation and treatment, you've got something to send them to. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want money to mean justice. And for far too long, everybody's saying if you got money, you can get justice. And for the poor people in minority communities, it's always been the opposite. And that's what we've got to fix. I'll just give Cobb County for an example. I met with the president of Ridgemont University. Ridgemont University is a counseling school. They graduate 65 people a year, and their sole focus is teaching counseling, addiction counseling, anger management counseling, family parenting counseling. That's what they do. We've got a church that has a counseling center, and it's empty.
Seriously?
Seriously, it's empty. I'm talking to the pastor the other day, and he says, I want to use this counseling center. How can we use it to help you? So now we're going to do a collaboration between the college and the church to put these future graduates into the counseling center with some supervision, some licensed practitioner supervision, and be able to funnel some of these low income that can't afford it on their own. Now, in Cobb County, we have a Family First, which usually does it based on income. But even still, some people are barely making it where, at the end of the month, if they made $900, $899.99 got spent.
Right.
So you don't have that extra money to push somewhere. And those are the things that we have to fix as a community, and we need the resources. One of the things he didn't cut was the accountability courts. But even the accountability courts are limited based on how much money they get as how many people they can accept. So we need to give them more money. Because those programs...
And they've been really successful, if I'm not mistaken.
They have been really successful. And that's why I say we have to take a different approach. We have to look prevention versus cure. The accountability courts have a recidivism rate of maybe 10%. Normal probation and parole, it's like 50%. And the way reentry should look, the person should be, it starts from when they're sentenced, okay? If you're going to put somebody in jail who doesn't have an education, let's give them an education while they're there. If they don't have job skills, let's give them job skills while they're there. So that way when they leave out of the jail, they've got some options. And we can do that in different ways, either through job training in the jails, or we can do some kind of reentry program. Once they leave out, they come to the reentry center, they fill out a survey, find out what they're good at, and let's get our local businesses involved to get them some training to be able to get them to be a contributing member of society. And you know, since I've been elected, you know, I haven't taken office yet, but I've went to our Chamber of Commerce, and they are so excited about restorative justice. And they were telling me about all the different jobs that they're bringing in, all the people that they have that we can talk to put on job fairs, to be willing to accept our people when they're coming back from prison or parole or jail. So that way we can tunnel them into some kind of job experience, so that way they become contributing members, and we don't have to worry about them recommitting crimes. It's the focus that we need to have, and that's what you're going to find with progressive prosecutors. That's what our focus is restoring people back to the community, so that way we don't have to worry about them committing crimes again. And that's the only way we're going to make our communities safer.
And not to overly simplify it, because everyone's different, but quite frankly, like the employment, just period. Someone's employment and whether or not they make over, I think, $10,000 a year has been proven to be the difference between whether or not they ever recidivate again, commit a crime again, or don't. And that it covers whether you're black or white, whether they're male or female. It has nothing to do with their education. It's like the biggest equalizer. That person's best chance of just having a job that pays over, which is a very low wage, but it's that stable employment. And it's crazy the difference that makes across all those different areas.
Well, I think the frustrating part about this is, like, we talked to Shelton and we were talking about diversity and inclusion. And ultimately at the end of it, I was like, so we're basically going backwards to the stuff that we used to, that we said we didn't need. And that's what it feels like listening to this conversation. Like, in my day, because I'm 41, we had those stuff. People went to jail. You learned. It was a joke we made. It was like, oh, so you learn how to be a lawyer in jail, because it was one of the things that they did while they were locked away. So to hear this conversation and saying that we kind of need to go back to focusing on that is actually crazy to me. It's mind-boggling. And like I said, when we talked to Shelton, it was the same thing. It's like, so when you strip everything down around diversity and inclusion, it's like, so we're basically having to walk backwards because the needle had not moved as far as we thought it moved. So it's just like, it's almost infuriating. It's just like really weird, because somewhere along the lines, somebody said, we don't need to do all that. We don't need to focus on that. Let's focus on this. They're okay. They're good. And now you fast forward almost a decade or two, and you're like, wait, now that we moved away from that, now we're seeing this ripple effect because we stopped doing this. When did we stop doing this? It's the craziest thing to me.
Well, it really started happening when we started asking for our civil rights. And they knew that, how can we strip people of their civil rights? By stripping them from the ability to vote. And it really started back in 1865, when laws started being made to say, let's pick up people of color and put them in jail, and then we'll put them back on the plantation for free. Because the way the 13th Amendment is written, you can only have free labor if it's because of a jail, being incarcerated. And it started way back then, and it has continued to the point where so many of us have been disenfranchised through felony convictions that, you know, in order to hold on to, because, you know, just like you guys were talking when I first came in about going to vote. If African Americans and Hispanic Americans vote in numbers, they will win every single time. If you look at the Democrats and the Republicans for our Caucasian brothers and sisters, they're about 50-50. So who makes the difference? The African American and Hispanic communities. And that's why it's so important. When we show up, we're going to win. It's no question about it. The key thing is, are we going to show up? And this race coming up in in January is so critical.
Literally.
So critical. I wish people could see how many bills the current House of Representatives has passed and are sitting at the Senate and not being voted on because Mitch McConnell refuses to do it. And why does he refuse to do it? Because they're all Democratic bills. And when we start doing stuff like that we're so focused on our party instead of our people, that's the wrong answer. And that's why we have to get out and vote in January, so that way we can get more focused on our people versus our parties.
Yeah.
I want to. let's make it plain about what a felony does, because I don't think people understand what that does when you get a felony. Can you make that plain? What does that do?
Yeah, when you get a felony, depending on what it is, but just a basic felony, as long as you're on parole, probation, or have to pay restitution, you are disenfranchised. Now, once you complete your parole successfully, then you get the right to vote back, but you still have to petition to get that right back. And if you don't do that, you'll be disenfranchised forever. And that's what many people don't know, because they know once they get a felony, the first thing they'll do is somebody will tell them, you can't vote no more. But that's not always the case. Once you finish your sentence, then you can vote. But if you don't petition.
And if you've lost other rights, there may be a different process to get access to those. But you do have to go through that court system, and it's not a situation in which you'd be entitled to a public defender for it. So it's going to be you, your own impetus to have to do that. There are other states, though, where it's much harder and it's much uglier. We were just talking about this in Mississippi, where if an individual has they've completed all their parole, they completed all their time, and they want their rights to vote back, they actually have to go before the state legislature, and it has to be passed by that whole body, which is crazy because you actually go online and see your name listed before the legislature and saying this person has completed their debt. We believe that they're a good human being. They can vote again. And you basically become a bill in a strange way. So it's like in some places but it's state by state. Like it varies place by place.
It varies by state, exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
To that question, though, so one of the other things I wanted to ask you too was about parties, but now you made me think about felonies. But partisanship in general, I think, kind of drives some of what you were talking about in terms of like why 20 years later we're still having these same conversations, is because there's always a new thing, a new thing that creates a fear, that creates a focus on a certain thing. At least right now, and this is a broader conversation, but right now our governor is focused on gang activities, focused on human trafficking as well. Anytime that there's a specific issue that becomes everyone's focus, there's always money that's driven behind that. It tends to become a slightly partisan issue in terms of who takes charge on it and what those consequences look like. In particular, for the conversations that we're having, the decriminalization conversation, the war on drugs, all of those were very big movements and conversations among people that translated into laws, which translated into mandatory minimums and all those sorts of things. So I think the partisanship is a really big deal, and I actually hate that in some offices, including your office, which is a really important office, I really don't even think it needs to be a partisan office. I really worry or really wonder if it wouldn't be better if we didn't have sheriffs who were Republican or Democratic,
I think you're right, because the key thing for me is I can't say I'm the district attorney for the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
I can't do that. My focus should be on the whole community. And to go what you're saying about the partisanship issue, different people take different priorities. And one of the priorities that happened at the start of the war on drugs was building prisons. And for a long time, those prison owners were paying big dollars, are still paying big dollars to different politicians. And those politicians have maintained that focus that we need to keep these big jails. And if we have big jails, we have to house them. And we have to get away from that mentality. You know, just because we have a 10-bedroom house doesn't mean we have to have 10 children. You know?
Yeah. And, Atlanta's been trying to repurpose their jail for a little while and have that whole project. What we're going to do with this building now that we close it down.
Let's move into agenda. So what's on your agenda first thing out the gate when you actually get into office? What's on your agenda?
Well, the first thing I want to do is I've done a lot of work with accountability courts. Veterans Court has always been my favorite because I was a veteran. And many people don't understand, when you get through an accountability court, you've accomplished something.
Explain that. What is an accountability court?
Yeah, accountability court is an alternative to prison. And basically, you're going to be required to do counseling, weekly meetings, weekly one-on-one counseling, weekly meetings with the judge. You're going to be drug tested. You're going to have to find a job. If you don't have a high school diploma, you're going to have to get your GED. You're going to have to make yourself a better person.
And who are the types of people or what types of charges?
For Veterans Court, it could be anything other than what we call the 7 deadlies, your rape, your murder, and things like that, but almost anything else.
Okay.
So there may be some aggravated assaults in there. There may be some domestic violence cases in there. But when they come to that court, they're saying to us that we want to get better. And so they go through the counseling to develop them. They go through one-on-one counseling. They go through what we call moral recognition training. And what that does, it resets the mind to get you out of that criminogenic thinking. And I think that's critical whenever we put anybody through an accountability court or even when we put people through diversion. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take those veterans who have graduated already who were what we call post-adjudication. And I want to take their charges, and I want to get those charges dismissed. And the reason I want to do that, because some of them are still sitting on 7-10-year probation sentences. But if they've got through that court, they've proven that they're a good person and that they're going to be a contributing member of society.
So is that a court? Because I never heard of that. Is that a court that you get sent to? Or is it something you have to request? How do you?
You have to request it. If you're a veteran, you can request to go to Veterans Court. It's totally voluntary. So if anytime you want to just drop it, you can, and then you face your regular charges. But for most of those, even the ones who don't graduate, they have gotten something from it and learned to be a better person. And that's what I like about it, because I was just talking to one of the new staff at the district attorney's office. And one thing we talked about was that we talked about 3 individuals, and neither one of them graduated, but they're all doing great things right now because they got something out of the treatment. And that's what's critical. And so going forward, I want to make all of our accountability courts pre-adjudication, which means you don't have to plead to the charges. If you graduate from the accountability court, the charges get automatically dismissed. So you've got a carrot there to make you stick it out. Because most of the time, when you do post-adjudication, you get through the accountability court, then you still got 7-10 years probation. And so your life is still hampered. So that's the first thing I want to do, and I want to do that for the ones who've already graduated in the Veterans Court. We've had 59 graduates. Not all of them were post-adjudication, but all the ones that were post-adjudication, I'm going to try to have a ceremony for them early January to dismiss their cases.
Nice.
So I want to do that for them. The second thing that we want to try to do is we want to do some bond reform. That means if you have a nonviolent offense and you're not a threat to the community, we're going to release you from jail and give you a court date, especially for simple possession charges. Simple possession charges, we're going to bring them back in and say, okay, we're going to offer you diversion. If you can complete diversion, you're good, your case will be dismissed. If you can't complete diversion, that tells me you've got a serious problem. Now we got to send you to an accountability court. And that's a volunteer thing, so if you want to go, it's going to make you a better person. It's going to help you with your life. And if they do, then they go. They're going to go pre-adjudication. So that way if they complete it, it's gone. No charges. And I think this is going to help a lot of people, because I don't want people saddled with a charge their whole life, because I had someone call me while I was on the campaign trail. He said, Mr. Broady, I had a drug charge 15 years ago. It's keeping me from getting an apartment. It's keeping me from getting job promotion. We cannot do that to individuals. We can't do that. So we have to make sure that we're setting people up for success. That's what's critical. And I'll tell you, the people I have in my district attorney's office are the best lawyers around. And they're willing to change that focus so we can make our community safer. And our judges are the same. The judges know and understand some of the things we've done in the past haven't worked. So we need a new approach. We need to do something a little bit different, because what we want to make sure is in Cobb County, we have a street called Six Flags Drive. And I want those kids on Six Flags Drive to be just as successful as the kids that live on Cherokee Street.
Right.
And for me, it's personal, because I knew growing up that, I lived in a bad neighborhood, but I had people who believed in me and helped me to be a better person. And that's what we got to do for everybody in our county. We cannot continue to leave behind our low-income and minority communities.
Yeah. I think that's really an important testament. So many of the folks that I talked to as part of my role with Reform Alliance have been on. It's crazy to talk to somebody who's been on probation in multiple counties for a DUI or for an alcohol-related thing. It's not as simple as, checking a box. Like, this is something that they will probably struggle with for their entire life. Right. Doesn't mean that they can't hold a job. It doesn't mean that they aren't needed as a father in their household, but they may have a problem. And it's always so much bigger than just what they've done on paper. And so I think that there's something to be said about realizing what those investments are. So you mentioned kids. This is something I think is really important. I don't know what DAs could do about it, but I think there's so much community education that's needed around the justice system. Like, so often our first introduction to it is that traffic ticket. And
that may put you on probation that they don't tell you about. Yeah.
Well, there's a level of ignorance, just a level of a layman does not understand that process. In the same way that you said, if you walk into something serious without an attorney, I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that even when people plead, they don't always really understand. I don't think when I go to these hearings, and I go often, I really don't know that it sinks into them what it will look like to have this on your record for 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, or if you do want to apply for a certain job in a certain industry. And I don't know how you can cross that threshold, but I mean, what would be some of your ideas if you could in a perfect world? Because I really think to a certain extent, the community, just even adults, need to kind of understand how the justice system works and need to care a little bit more about it than they do.
In a perfect world, everybody that came to court would have a defense attorney who's a zealot advocate for them. You know, you're not, you get, one thing I'll say is every defense attorney is not going to get you off if you're guilty.
Right.
But what they can do is they can minimize the impact that that's going to have on your life. And that's what's critical, is minimizing that impact so it doesn't hurt you so bad that 15, 20 years from now, you're still like, oh man, why did I get this? You know? And when we have those defense attorneys who are zealot advocates, you'll find out that if an officer did something wrong, they can help you get the charges thrown off. If there's some kind of technicality that the prosecutor has to give you, they can make sure
making sure your rights are protected.
Make sure you're right. That's the way. They make sure your rights are protected. They can negotiate on your behalf to help you get a reduction in your charge, get a reduction in your sentence. Whatever they need to do, they will do that for you. And it's critical that people understand that. That's why you have to have an attorney. And for our community, I think it works better because, like, as an assistant solicitor, you know, we get a lot of DUIs. And a lot of people come in and they say, well, I can't afford an attorney. I say, well, I think once I tell you what's going to happen on this DUI, then you're going to think twice about that. And I would never let someone come before us without an attorney who had a DUI. The first thing I do is say, can you afford an attorney? If they say no, okay, I need you to go interview with the circuit defender. And if you can't interview with if the circuit defender says you don't qualify because you make too much money, if you tell me you can't afford it, I'm going to go to the judge and say, Your Honor, can we appoint this person an attorney? So that way they have somebody to represent them. And then we go forward with the case from there with your attorney, so that way your rights are protected and everything that you are entitled to that you can get. You know, because for me, when I sit there and talk to somebody who doesn't have an attorney, if you want to take your plea, yeah, I can make you do, we can do that. But when I start telling you all the stuff that you have to do, you have to understand that if you miss one thing,
right,
you're going to jail. And that's
a big deal.
That's why they have to. That's why it's so important for them to have an attorney, because I can sit there and tell them, okay, you got to do this, and the judge is going to tell you got to do this within this time, this within this time, this within this time, and that defense attorney, his job is to make sure that you do it. You know, me as a prosecutor, I'm not going to call you up and say, hey, John, you know, your 30 days for your evaluation is over.
Okay.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
You know, so
that's a good point.
That's why it's so important, you know, protecting those rights, making sure that, you know, every step through the process, you have somebody by your side who's looking out for you. And many people will say bad things about public defenders, but truth be told, you can tell when you have a bad public defender because he's not advocating for you. And if that's the case, go to his boss and say, hey, I want another one. You know, I've had many people come to me and say, hey, you know, this guy hasn't called me, this guy hasn't done this. And no, maybe he hasn't called you, but he's been talking to me. And so, you know, it's not necessarily that he's not doing nothing. He just hasn't had to tell you anything because we haven't resolved anything yet. And so they need to understand that, you know, every public defender, you know, we watch the movies, and every time you see a public defender on the movie, he is the worst lawyer.
They're scrambling. And
Well,
they're all
now
confused.
on the
But there are some
reciprocally,
good.
well, there's a show called All Rise on CBS, and they show that side of it. And I'm in love with Emily, and Emily just stood on a desk the other day and was like, "Oh my God, we got to do better. We need more money." So they're trying to change that narrative a little bit. I will definitely say that.
We've got some incredible attorneys that are public defenders. But
Yes.
really quick, because I don't know how much time we have left, can you please just advocate or champion jury service for me before we leave? It's so critically important. a lot of it, but also, I mean, there's so much, hysteria around what the jury looks like when the jury pool is there. But I know so many people who take those notices and they show up and they just pray that they don't get this. But it's an important opportunity. And when you don't like the verdict and when you feel like it wasn't fair and you didn't show up to help your fellow man.
Kyle, I hope you listen to this. I hope you listen to this because you've never done it. And when it comes to the mail, you hear Simone's voice.
When I get it, I'm gonna go. I mean, I'm not gonna be excited about it, to that extent.
It's nothing to be excited about. I promise you. Like if you get on, but I literally you silly like go in a circle in the hopes that you get picked, and you have to just sit there every day until you're just. It's a nightmare. Well, if you get it, maybe. But
there's two aspects to it. First of all, you have to register to vote because if you don't register to vote, you're not going to get picked for a jury. Now, when you do get picked for a jury, you want to give honest answers when they ask you questions because what you want to make sure is that whoever is on that defense table, that you're going to give them a fair trial. And many of us have biases already. And what you don't want to happen is someone get on the jury pool, you've got 12 Caucasians judging a black man, and they have biases. They have hidden biases. Already from the beginning, anytime, if you look at any situation right now, when a black man does something, before it's not innocent till proven guilty. It's guilty till proven innocent. And we have to understand that we have such control of that when we sit on that jury. Because on a 12-panel jury, it only takes one person to say no. And you could be that one person, especially, but don't just say no because he's another black person. You say no because the evidence is not there to convict that person. And that's what you want to make sure that everybody that goes through the criminal justice system gets a fair shake. And the only way we can do that is if we take jury duty serious and we sit there and we give our perspective to every other juror. Because, I'm trying to think of the situation I want to think about. I had a situation where two guys were in court. I was talking to one of them. These guys worked at Jim and Nick's. So I'm sitting there talking to the guy, and he tells me that Jim and Nick's doesn't allow them to smoke on the property. So they go across the street to smoke. The place that they were smoking at had cameras. So next thing you know, they got 7 police cars showed up in front of them. They get arrested for loitering and prowling, which means you just happen to be in the wrong place. Okay, that's what the charge is supposed to mean. But they had no burglary tools. They had no drugs. So what did they get arrested for? Being African.
Black.
Yeah.
There you go. And so I'm sitting there. I'm looking at the guys. I said, I'm going to dismiss this because not only did he go to jail, but he lost his job. And then I asked him. I said, "Where's the other guy at? Is he here today?" He said, "Yeah, he's here." And he points to him, and literally they were standing right next to us. And so I go over there. They're signing him up to go to trial.
Oh, good grief.
Now, if you think about a loitering and prowling child, how are you going to get out of that? You're not.
That's just so crazy.
But they weren't doing anything. And the only reason why the other guy's charge was able to be dropped because me as an African American, using my perspective, was able to tell these other lawyer that, hey, this needed to be dropped. And that's the same role that we can play on juries and why it's so critical that we take part in those juries. And it's not to make everybody not guilty, but for them to have our perspective of what things look like.
Advocacy.
For sure.
All right, so unfortunately we are out of time.
I know.
And yeah, because you kept going and kept asking 50,000 questions, and he's busy and we out of time, so that does not work. All right, so we want to say thank you to our very special guest and friend of the show, Mr. Flynn Broady. We are excited to see what you're going to do because we know it's going to be great things. And those that are listening and watching, you heard it's going to be great things. So you can finally go to Cobb, people. I know all of you are scared. You can finally go to Cobb. There are some black folks in administration. Y'all can go now. It's good. It's clear. Any final thoughts from you two?
No, January 5th. Or January runoff. Make sure that you vote. It's critical to vote. And Merry Christmas in advance.
But definitely Merry Christmas. I'm glad to have you in office. I grew up in Cobb County, so it was safe before, but I like the work that you're doing, and we need more people like you in office. So thank you for your future work.
Thank you.
All right, so on next Friday, we're going to have Jason Ford, who is our insurance guy, because with this whole COVID and people dying without insurance, it's serious. So we're going to really get into insurance next week. What do these terms mean? Why should you have it? What should you look for? All that good stuff. So we will see you guys next Friday, same time, same place on Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.
I'm actually excited.